Welcome back to Hillbilly Pillars and my countdown slash ranking of Bob Dylan's studio albums. I'm pretty excited about this chapter because I think I'm finally going to start getting some pretty hard disagreements from folks. And that's what these lists are for, or at least one of the things. I will remind everyone this is not best in my consideration. These are my favorites. So it can't be wrong. That gives me an out. But we are now at number 30. I'm doing these 5 at a time. And coming in at number 30, 2017's Triplicate. That's not a wild, but very basic, I think kind of interesting album cover. Just that, I don't even know what kind of shade of color that is. My father was a colorist in the textile industry. He could probably tell you, but I can't. But a 3 LP closer to Bob Dylan's venture into the Great American Songbook. This comes after an earlier ranking of the second release in the series of Fallen Angels, and this is the last. It's 3 LPs, Triplicate, and each particular album has its own title. So I guess you could really get in the weeds and argue it is one release, but there are 5 American Songbook Bob Dylan albums. LP1 is Till the Sun Goes Down, LP2 is Devil Dolls, and LP3 is Coming Home Late. As I mentioned with Fallen Angels, I feel like the reason this gets ranked above that is a lot in the way these are released. The nature of this being 3 whole LPs and closing out his venture into this. I mean, at the time when this came out, is this just going to be what he does now for the rest of his career? We're going to get like 30, American Songbook albums. But now that you know that this closes it off, it gives it some juice. And also, so many songs and the different LPs to choose by gives it more of for me, I think this is interesting in like a favorites list, a casual vibe. It's like, I just not really sure what I want to listen to. I can always it's one I go to frequently because I'll just pull something off Triplicate and put it on. And it's also, I like to listen to it as I mainly do, but it's one of my few default kind of background. I know my head's going to be somewhere else, but I just like playing in the background. It was reviewed very well, and one of those things I like to caution with Bob Dylan, as I understand, they're like venerated publications. Us older white guys know about, the Rolling Stones and those typical. They have artists, and pretty much anything they do, they grade highly, or the vast majority of the releases they do. But this was kind of over a wide range, including modern review places. It was very well received. And that's because, once again, like I said in Fallen Angels, the arrangements of his touring band on this, and then Bob singing, and his phrasing and the way he takes ownership of these classic songs, it was really great and really interesting. The packaging, not so great if you're a vinyl person. It's just kind of 3 LPs stuffed into this kind of flimsy, mine's beat up and stuff, which I don't mind that much. Maybe, as people who watch my channel know, I've been into vinyl for about 7 or 8 years now. And so I don't mind. It gets a little beat up or something because I like that I'm getting life into these releases, because that's me having beaten it up. So it was new. I do love. I'm kind of partial to the Bob artwork and stuff, and it's kind of a dope inner photo that he did. But just the playing of the band, and I think it's a really interesting selection of songs. It's kind of all over the place. The first release, Shadows in the Night, which hasn't come up on my list, building drama and tension there with that. Just seemed to have a real kind of evening, sun going down type of night in the city type of mood. Shadows in the Night, right? And then Fallen Angels just seemed to be just banger, well-known American Songbook songs. But this is kind of all over the place, and the energy can kind of drift in and out in different vibes in different ways, which I find interesting. So yeah, at number 30, I've got Triplicate, and I'm picking one song off each album as a favorite that I'm going to put in a playlist eventually. And the one I'll do off this is, excuse me, is one that always makes me smile. And it kicks off LP2, side 1, and it's Braggin'. So, yep, Triplicate. Now, one, probably some folks have wondered that why have they not seen this yet? But I have a really unique explanation for this. At 29, venturing back to the 80s. I always think this came out earlier than it did. It's kind of interesting in the 80s scope of it for me. It's 1985's impossibly 80s Bob Dylan release, Empire Burlesque. And let me explain to you how this is like a How I Met Your Mother, or how I came to really enjoy Empire Burlesque. I have this kind of working theory a lot in movies that there's like a circle of like good and bad. And it's like something starts off and it's great, and then not so great, and then bad, terrible, awful. And then if it crosses just over the line again, it's kind of great again because it's so bad. It's like the Mystery Science Theater 3000 principle. And the movie that comes to my mind first when I think about that is I can't believe I have to say the original because what a blasphemous thing that they remade this. But Roadhouse. And there's a connection here. Roadhouse is just terribly written, ridiculous plot, so fun, so enjoyable, and such a rewatchable, as they say on The Ringer. But that movie closes with a cover of Till the Night Comes Falling from the Sky off of Empire Burlesque. I think it's the Jeff Healey band who does it. And so when I go to put on Empire Burlesque, I'm in the mindset of enjoying this from the vantage of it's so bad, it's good. I know that may be like trying to find some reached reason to enjoy a Dylan album, but what I will say is as songs, as crafted songs, there are some really, really great tracks on here, and I think pretty solid throughout. The production, I don't know what's going on. I think it was pretty, it's pretty well written about in the time. There was like change in producers and dissatisfaction with Bob and the sound. I think there was a lot of that in the 80s for him. But I think there was a real sense in this that he was trying something. And like I said, the timeline's interesting me because we're talking 85, and this seems to be right at the height of, especially like musically, like a monoculture. The music video age had taken over, and they're just these handful of acts, and they're just omnipresent. Springsteen, U2, Madonna, Michael Jackson. They're just song, video. They're everywhere. And this comes kind of right after that big first wave of that. And I think it's like an attempt at a jump at that, kind of like catching that in some way. It does not catch that. But in the whole, I really do. I approach it that way, and I enjoy it. Now, this is all an exception, is almost always mentioned when anybody talks about Empire Burlesque. From what I remember reading, it was kind of like a last minute, recorded in maybe one or two takes. The last song, Dark Eyes, is just a perennially elite Bob Dylan track. It'd have to be a video I have to do someday. There's no one that holds a candle to Bob Dylan, in my opinion, as far as album closers. He's just got probably 15 elite album closers, at least in his discography. And this is another one, and it comes on the back of this just really questionably a best produced album, very lost in its time in a bad way. But Dark Eyes, remarkable song, stunning. But Tight Connection to My Heart, I really enjoy. It does like really highlight the what the production did here, because there's a version on the bootleg series. It's volumes 1 through 3. On volume 3, one of my favorite Bob Dylan discs, of this song, and it is fantastic. It is like, it might go on my 20 favorite Dylan songs as far as that version on that. I love it, and it really is markedly better than what's on the album here. I'll Remember You. That's kind of a fun one because I saw that a couple of times live, and back in the day, my friend Ben went with me to a lot of shows. And we would, anytime that song would come on after we saw him do it, we would always, the one line, but in the end, my dear sweet friend, but instead of saying friend, we say, my dear sweet Ben, I'll remember you. And let's see, Clean Cut Kid. I made a rather unfortunate reel, whatever they're called, video here on YouTube of me dancing to that. I like to get up and move to Clean Cut Kid. Emotionally Yours is a great R&B number, I think. And yeah, there we go. Empire Burlesque. One other thing I wanted to add, I'd never been overseas, and my wife, raise your hand, guys, if this is true in your world, definitely cultured me quite a bit. And the first trip I ever took overseas was for our honeymoon to Budapest. And I went to a Budapest record store, and this was when I was kind of kicking off getting into vinyl. And it kind of in that, like, I don't want to say this wrong, like, I think it's Eastern Bloc, like, nation thing. It was, everything's a little like pop culture wise behind the times, and all they had was 80s Bob. So I got I got this Empire Burlesque and Real Live and Infidels. I think that might have been it, but that's all that's the only Bob Dylan they had. They didn't have anything else. They didn't have any of the classic stuff that you would expect to see, greatest hits, none of that, no. But the 80s Bob they had covered, and in that, whoo, one of my absolute favorite things is on the album itself, are these two hype stickers, especially what year is it? Heat Wave 85. Woo, that takes me back. So, I think there was a vinyl tag thing where it was like, what was the one album you would save in a fire? And I think for me, so far, in my album collection, it would be this, just because 80s Budapest record store and those hype stickers. So, yeah. So, it also kind of has an unfair advantage on that. All right. Boy, I'll probably talk way more about Empire Burlesque than anybody would ever want to hear. Here we go. All right. Now we're starting to, like, what am I thinking? And it I think covers an interesting bigger picture thing into me for my Dylan fandom and what I return to as far as favorites. And at number 28, I have 1964's Another Side of Bob Dylan. Kind of his au revoir of the folk era. There's bringing it all back home, but that actually within the album, like, transitions. And it really got me thinking. There is, when I first got into Bob, it was his 60s Zenith stuff, as I've mentioned in a previous one of these ranking videos. This is Greatest Hits Volume 1 that, blew my mind. And it was very much of all of that, and these early, recordings that most culturally associated with, and that's what I listen to. But it's almost like a phase. I still, from time to time, will crack these albums open. And when I'm talking about these, I'm really talking about Another Side of Bob Dylan, The Freewheelin' Bob Dylan, and The Times They Are Changing. And in those three, as you can see, this is the one I have ranked lowest. I think it's I don't know. I don't. It just is favorites wise. I don't really. The All I Really Want to Do opener is not a favorite of mine. I don't really like. I'm not a big fan of Black Crow Blues. I do like Spanish Harlem Incident. So I think it kind of starts off kind of slow for me. However, on that note, and this is really Bob for you, just like Empire Burlesque with Dark Eyes, Chimes of Freedom. I think that's his. Nadir might be the wrong word, but his like final holistic encapsulation of all that he kind of carried with him in like reestablishing folk music with his songwriting. I don't know if if I was pushed to the spacecraft kind of thing that might be the song that I would choose. I don't know. It's hard. It's almost like you really need to. You need like this era and then anything after that one you would want to pick. But Chimes of Freedom's an impossibly all consuming great song. It's one of those. I'm not into the literature world and all the belly aching about the Pulitzer Prize or whatever. I think there is a skill, and it's mentioned when he did get it. His work in the modern songcraft. So like you have to write to it being presented in that way. So that matters. And I understand if you put just his lyrics up against great poetry, it doesn't hold. Sometimes it does, but usually doesn't hold. But Chimes of Freedom is one of my he did that to song in a way that allowed him to perform that to people and communicate that message. And yeah, he earned that prize. So some other tracks. I mean, It Ain't Me, Babe closes the album. My Back Pages. To Ramona's always been a favorite. Like a really interesting take on like the societal pressures and like someone sink into that world. And so I think you can start to drill me. I think a lot of people would have very high because they just feel like all of this early stuff is what's vital. And I understand that. But for me, this is number 28, Another Side of Bob Dylan. Now, fast forwarding far in the future with another reference to Europe is 2009's Together Through Life. This was the last album that I procured of Bob Dylan's, his last studio album, on vinyl. And I did it by purchasing and putting it on hold in a record shop in Cologne, Germany. My wife, way back in the day, it was one of those things in the back of like a teen magazine. It was like, write off and get a pen pal. She actually did that with the return postage stamp she included and everything. And a girl from Germany named Liz wrote her back. And they have established a lifelong friendship and have visited each other dozens of times, I would say at this point, back and forth overseas. It's a really cool story. But we were going to visit Liz and let her spend time with our son Henry over there. It was our first time visiting her in Germany. Sarah's been over there a number of times. But I was like, ooh, I'm going to be over there because all the USA versions were priced kind of crazy on Discogs because it was out of print and rare. But I found a doable version. I mean, I still think it was like $50-something. But I'm like, to get it, to have said I got my last Dylan album there, it was really cool. But all that is my own personal story. As far as the album goes, you're going to see in this list, I am a Latter-day Bob guy. And this one does lack in comparison to the other original Latter-day Dylan studio albums. And I think for me, it's the weak tracks are just kind of throwaway. For me, I have those as Jolene, Shake, Shake Mama, and It's All Good. Those miss for me. And those all come on the backside, on side 2. But after that, it's just stuff I really love. And I love the horns on the album. And kind of the vibe and the kind of the tenor of the songwriting in it. You've got Beyond Here Lies Nothing. I really like If You Ever Go to Houston. I Feel a Change Coming On is really great. That's another reference to my wife I've mentioned before. The first time I ever saw her was at a Bob Dylan cover night. And I kind of had this internal thing because I had been to a couple others. It was a local artist that I've become friends with who put those together. And my thing would be whoever plays the most recent Bob Dylan song like wins. And she did. She did Beyond Here Lies Nothing off of this. And it wasn't long after it came out. I'm like, all right, that's serious street cred. So yeah, let me see, 30, 29. So that was number 27. All right, now we're going back to Bob Heyday, and I think this is going to be the first one where folks, I could see this being in a number of folks like top 12 for sure. But this is number 26 for me, and this is 1974's Planet Waves. Look at this old copy with the corner cut. And I'll tell you what, one of the things that always was, like I said, I kidded the CD area. So my first familiarity and like falling in love with all of these was via CDs. But like seeing a Bob Dylan record with this Asylum label just whacks me out. It just never looks right, man. It is supposed to be that Columbia red. So that always throws me off. Planet Waves. Here's a thing I will say as far as me and Planet Waves go. Is to me, this is the biggest gap in sides release for me in his discography as far as my personal likes, which, I know, right? Like you guys know, that's what I'm talking about here. Because I have to rank everything, it's possible side A of Planet Waves is the top 10 Bob side for me. I love it. On a night like this, what a great opener. What a great opener, and like a real kind of nuts and bolts, whatever that Americana world of things that Bob Dylan and the band formed when they played together. It's like just kind of like a perfect exaltation of that. Going, Gone. What a brilliant song, which reminds me, I've got to go back and pick songs from the last couple of albums. I'll always forget that, but I'll go back and get it. Tough Mama, I love. Hazel, Something There Is About You. And then it closes with, I have to say, the slower version of Forever Young. And that's another interesting vinyl world thing. It's like coming out of being a CD person, it's an obvious observation, but it's still one that's had like lots of cool ramifications for me getting later into vinyl. Is that break between side A and side B on single LPs, and like how important that is for song arrangement. And so CD, it was always really cumbersome. You had Forever Young twice back to back sequenced. So I think that's always hangs over it a little bit for me, which is not even fair because it really does. You flip it over and it's like this whole different vibe. But yeah, the side B, very deeply personal songs. And, I'm of the Bob community and read a lot about it. And, and there are some people that feel incredibly strongly about these songs. And I get it. Wedding Song, Dirge, just very deeply personal songs from Bob Dylan. But it's hard for me to explain what it is about it that just doesn't catch me. But I just very rarely return to the second side of this album, which I don't want to go as far as to say it's the only one, but there aren't many at all in Bob's catalog where when I'm going to listen to an album, I'm not thinking I'm listening to the whole thing, but when I pull Planet Waves, I'm like, I'm wanting to hear side A. So yeah, Planet Waves, 1974. All right, there you go. We have, let's see, get them out here. We're at 30, 29, 28, 27, 26. So the next chapter, I'll be getting to 25. I really appreciate you tagging along for the ride. Thanks.